As a New Zealander, trying to digest the July internationals is like trying to digest a dodgy petrol station pie you've had at 3 in the morning that's now giving you painful explosive diarrhea. But there was more than just the Irish AB series going on. Steal that last like from the chicken box and let's reflect on what happened in July. Now, I've got to start with Ireland versus New Zealand, a cracking test series that the rest of the world would have loved. But as a Kiwi, it was like watching your girlfriend have sex with your best friend while you're trapped in a cupboard, unable to escape. In my last video, I banged on about how shit I thought All Blacks coach Fozzie was. And yeah, I still think he's about as useful as an armless amputee and a circle jerk. But now I want to focus on Ireland. Ireland, you were magnificent. So wildly world class across the park. Tadhg Beirne is my favourite forward in the world right now. Johnny Sexton is like a fine wine. Old and dusty, but also the best 10 in the world for the July series. Farrell, what an incredible coach, and he showed well that he was playing chess. Ian Foster was just trying to work out the rules to checkers. Before the series, I made a video saying I thought that Ireland had a great shot at winning at least one game, given the recent history between the two teams. I was right, but I didn't think they had much of a chance of winning the series in my heart of hearts. And we Kiwis, we were lulled into a false sense of security in Game 1, winning 42-19 at Eden Park. Still, other than that 20-minute period where we picked up a couple of opportunistic tries, we were all Blacks in the first half for about 20 minutes, the game was far tighter than the end scoreline would suggest. And I know every man in their YouTube channel has banged on about it, but it was the start of the test that set the tone for the entire series. The first try, which was essentially replicated in each test, it was well worked, and the All Blacks looked on each occasion clueless on how to stop the relentless Irish charge, and the eventual try just felt purely like an inevitability. For the vast majority of the series, the All Blacks were outplayed, outcoached, and couldn't hold their nerve in those big challenging moments, whereas the Irish just seemed to get better and better. Their belief in the game plan and each other was as solid as a honeymooner's cock on his wedding night. And even in the last test, when the ABs were roaring back into it, when Irish teams of the past would have collapsed under the enormous weight of this historical moment, they stood tall and won the big moments and sent the All Blacks into a pit of despair they have rarely experienced. The nature of this test series is genuinely historic. This lot, led by Andy Farrell, has joined a very exclusive list of teams. They joined South Africa in 1937, which happens to be the same year Johnny Sexton made his Irish debut, the Lions in 1971, Australia in 1986, and France in 1994, and now Ireland in 2022. As a proud O'Sullivan and a New Zealander, but a proud O'Sullivan, I can say this, and I mean it. Come on, you boys in green. Boy big. Thank you for pointing that out to me, guys. I appreciate it. Now, time to flush the dunny and move on from the sheepshaggers and the boys in green and talk about the other sheepshaggers and the biltong-hungry meat-eaters. Wales versus South Africa was another epic series, and one where the Welshmen picked up their first historic win in South Africa. But they'll be kicking themselves that they weren't able to walk away with their own historic series win, as it was sort of like a sheep and mating season, there for the taking. The Welsh for too long have been the gallant losers of international rugby, but coming off their most recent loss to the perpetual losers of the Six Nations, Italy, they did put up a good showing. They're getting that historic first win in South Africa, where Rosmini old boy Gareth Anscombe slotted that clutch sideline conversion that took balls the size of Aberystwyth and Llanelli, and to win in South Africa in that cauldron in Bloemfontein is an immense achievement. For most of the game, it didn't seem that remarkable. The Saffers were doing what they do, squeezing visiting teams into submission and popping over threes when needed. But the Welsh hung tough and came up with the clutch try in the game's dying moments for another piece of Northern Hemisphere history over a Southern Hemisphere powerhouse. The game that I think the Welsh will be crying into the leek and potato soup over was the first test. They looked outstanding for parts of the game. The backline was as slick as a BP oil spill, but far less damaging to the environment. I thought they were catching the South Africans on the hop, especially as Yanchi's playing like I was his tactical advisor. Unfortunately for the Welsh, their discipline was about as good as a fat kid trying to resist eating cake, and it must be said that a lot of the 50-50 calls in that game went against them. The South African line-out drive was immense, but it felt like a game the Welsh should have won. In the third test, the Bry boys really showed the All Blacks how to respond after a loss at home by putting on their most clinical display. They played hard and brutal classic South African rugby, and for my money they looked the best they'd had since they won the World Cup in 2019. The Welsh didn't just roll over, and they showed real grit to keep it relatively close. But at the end of the day, the Biltong Bandits had too much in the tank, and the game looked as though it was never really in the balance. It was also great to see some of the big names of South African rugby, Siya Kolisi, Lakanyo Am and Handré Pollard, step up and play well. But a special mention has got to go to Eben Etzebeth. He reminded us in his 100th test why he's been considered one of the world's best locks, one of the world's best players for so long. He didn't let the occasion get to him, and for my money he was the best on ground in the third test. The man is a giant in every respect of the game. Now moving on to another country synonymous with meat eating and the jocks. Argentina versus Scotland. What can I say about this game? Oh, this series really, I can't say bugger all, to be honest. I didn't watch a single second of this. There's just so much good rugby in July, and a man's got to sleep sometime. And Scottish fans happy. I'll do better next time. I have a full-time job that has nothing to do with YouTube, so, you know, something's got to give. Let me know how I can make it up to you. Write in the comments, as long as it's appropriate. Kia ora team, I really felt like I let everyone down there, so I've just gone and watched the final test match between Los Pumas and Scotland. What a game! What a game! I'm glad I watched it. Maybe the best of the entire July series. Like, there's been a lot of amazing games, and that was incredible. I heard it was a tight finish, but that was amazing. There were so many times in that game that you thought the Argentinians were out of it. There were so many great tries. Van der Merwe, Scotland, you've got a player there. I also really liked the look of Ashman. That bump off he did to score that try looked like he was a Tongan. That was incredible. But yeah, there was a lot of great stuff in there. And the way the Yaji stayed in there, and the try to Manueli Boffelli, the Edinburgh play at the end, there's not really been a better finish than that in the whole series. So yeah, look, I'm sorry I didn't give it a full review or anything like that, but sorry to Scotland, but that was an incredible game. What a comeback. Now, moving on to the crumpet munchers and the crims from across the ditch. Now, just so everyone knows, it's probably bloody obvious, especially if you watched a video of mine before, I'm not impartial. I'm a Kiwi. I see things from a Kiwi perspective, and I can't be asked to be overly impartial. I see folks pretending to be objective, but sometimes their bias shows like a builder's butt crack when they're loading a truck. I'd rather just acknowledge that I'm your regular shit-eating All Blacks fan, but when it comes to England versus Australia, it's a tricky one. It's kind of like watching your old schoolyard bully play your mum's ex-boyfriend. You think they're both douchebags, and you don't know who to support, and seeing as it's rugby, a double knockout is extremely unlikely. You just kind of enjoy the game, and there was a lot to enjoy about this series. Now, sadly for the Wallabies, they played by far their best game in the first test. Despite Swain being red carded for being that kid in class who finally cracks the shits and lashes out after being bullied by the same kid all term. Honestly, I'd rather take this piss-weak headbutt than have my hair pulled. As I remember, that bitch move on the playground hurt like a motherfucker. And I was only getting my hair pulled by 25 kg little girls, not 126 kg rugby players with haircuts that look like they've lost a bet. The Aussies showed great heart in their game and determination, and they really did put on one of their best performances for ages, showing that, like any good Aussie battler, they're at their best when their backs are against the wall. They outworked the Poms and they got a great dub. From there, I think many people would have thought that would have broken the spirit of the English, beating them with only 14 men, and could pull off a series win. Especially considering Eddie Jones's side had been on a 4-game losing streak. But the English have their own Aussie battler, and like a cockroach after a nuclear bomb, that pest just keeps on going. Eddie Jones's sides have a habit of doing well when you write them off, and not living up to expectations when you expect something big of them. So, if I was an England fan, for the good of the team, I'd write them off for the next World Cup. You never know. They just might win it. In the second test, the English were almost flawless in the first half and put on a chef's kiss of a set piece play. Oh, that play. That line-out play, that's very tasty. England was better at the collision and the breakdown, and the Aussies were late getting into the game and were on the receiving end of a very tough yellow card. Now come on, tell me how that is a clear and deliberate knock-on. The Aussies put on a lot of heat in the second half and came roaring back into the game through tries to Tinny, Tupou and Sammy Karevi. And with Marcus Smith getting time in the naughty chair for what actually looked like a deliberate knock-on, I thought the Aussies were about to roll them. But fair play to the Bangers and Biscuit Brigade, they stood strong and started playing some attractive rugby of their own and kept extending their lead. This one has a lot of parallels to the third test between the Ireland and the ABs. And like that game, the Northern Hemisphere visitors kept their heads and came out on top. The decider in the series was played at the SCG, and the place was a picture as it was decked out in canary yellow, ready for the boys in canary yellow to put on a great performance. The Aussies did a blinder of a try to Tom Wright early with some excellent interplay, but after exchanging a few penalties, the English took the lead through a try to Freddie Stewart in the crucial period before half-time. Then, on the other side of the break, there was an opportunistic try to boy wonder and reincarnated Carlos Spencer, Marcus Smith, from a very sloppy Wallabies lineout. If this kid is as good as his sweet facials when he's in the clear, the English have got something pretty special on their hands. Now the Crims got another one to keep it tight. Once again, the boys from the north kept their nerve to dominate the collision and the breakdown, and they won the whole series. Now I have three main takeaways from the July Internationals. Number one, New Zealand and Australian rugby are really missing having regular games against South African opposition, now that they no longer compete in Super Rugby. The South Africans have always kept us Antipodeans honest in the forwards, and now that we don't compete against them regularly, our forwards have been left wanting against the Northern Hemisphere teams. Number two, considering the matchups and the Southern Hemisphere home advantage, and despite the Argies and the South Africans getting series wins, the July series for me had confirmed that the power base of world rugby is in the Northern Hemisphere. And the fact that the Welsh got a historic first win in South Africa shouldn't be overlooked. And finally, number three, how lucky have we been? The majority of these series have been of the highest quality, tight as a nun's knickers, and as intense as a New Zealander defending Craig Joubert's refereeing in the 2011 World Cup final. To go into the final weekend of these games with all the series tied up, well, you can't really ask for any more as a fan of the game they play in heaven. It's a great time to love rugby. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and if you really enjoyed this, try heading over to my Patreon page. The link is in the description down below, unless I haven't set it up yet. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Mwah!